Tementa Dung, Tyler, Brielle, Phil, Maren, Glenn, Aunt Roz, Walt, Cassie, Dolores. Tu Yusindun Ten Husan Hutan Tonton Kaka. If you're too good to live here for free, then go ahead and pay your own way. That's what my brother said to me the night I told him I was saving up to move out. He laughed when he said it, like it was a joke, like I was the punchline. I was standing in the kitchen of the house I'd grown up in, still wearing my scrubs from a 12-hour shift, reheating leftover pasta because there was nothing else in the fridge. Again, I'd gone grocery shopping 4 days before. I'd bought food for the whole week, and somehow, by Tuesday, it was gone. I already knew where it went. I'd watched it disappear bite by bite, bag by bag, into my brother's apartment downstairs. He hadn't offered to replace any of it. He never did. I was 28 years old, working full-time as a medical records coordinator at a hospital outside of Columbus, Ohio. And I was still living in my childhood bedroom because every time I tried to save enough to leave, something came up. Something always came up. And that something always had my brother's name attached to it. His name is Derek. He's 37. And for as long as I can remember, Derek has had a gift. A genuinely impressive, almost artistic gift. For making his problems everybody else's responsibility. When he lost his job at the warehouse back in 2019, our mom let him move back into the in-law suite downstairs. Just until he got back on his feet, she said. He was still there when she passed away 2 years later. She left the house to both of us equally. Her 2 kids, split down the middle. The will was straightforward. The lawyer explained it clearly. We both got it. What I didn't get, not right away, was what that would actually mean when Derek decided the house was his, and I was the inconvenient roommate who paid the bills. It started small, the way these things always do. He'd ask me to cover the electric bill 1 month because his check was late. I'd do it. Next month, same thing, different excuse. The internet, the water, the home insurance. He was always about to handle it, always just waiting on something to come through. I kept a mental tab without really meaning to. It grew quietly, the way mold does, behind walls you can't see. By the time I sat down and actually added it up, really added it up, I had covered over $14,000 in shared household expenses over the span of 19 months. $14,000. That was my down payment. That was my escape. And Derek was downstairs watching a 65-inch TV he'd bought on a payment plan he couldn't afford, eating my groceries and telling me I needed to learn to be more of a team player. The night everything broke open started with a letter. I came home from work and there was a notice on the kitchen counter. I almost walked past it. I almost assumed it was junk mail, one of those vague bank offers or credit card solicitations. But something made me stop. My name was on the front, not Derek's. Mine. I opened it. It was from a bank I didn't recognize. A personal line of credit, it said, had been opened in my name at our home address. The account had a balance of $9,200. The minimum payment was past due. I read it 3 times. I thought I was misunderstanding something. I called the number on the back of the notice and sat on hold for 22 minutes while I paced the length of the kitchen. When the representative finally picked up, she confirmed the account was real. It was in my name, my social security number, my date of birth, and the address we both lived at. I had never opened that account. I hung up and stood very still for a moment, the kind of stillness that comes right before something cracks. Then I went downstairs and knocked on Derek's door. He answered in a t-shirt and basketball shorts, holding a bowl of cereal. My cereal. The box was sitting on his counter behind him, open. "Did you open a line of credit in my name?" I asked. He looked at the letter in my hand. He didn't look surprised enough. That's what I remember most, the way his eyes went flat instead of wide. Guilty people who get caught off guard look panicked. Derek just looked caught. "It was a loan," he said. "I needed it to cover the car repair and the deposit on the new job." "I was going to tell you." "You were going to tell me," I repeated. "It's not a big deal. I'm going to pay it back." I stood there looking at my older brother, the person who used to drive me to school when the bus was late, who taught me how to ride a bike in the driveway of this exact house. and I felt something shift inside me so completely that I couldn't even put a name to it. It wasn't rage. It was more like recognition, like finally seeing something clearly after squinting for years. That's identity theft, Derek. It's family, he said. Don't be dramatic. I walked back upstairs and called my best friend Simone. She picked up on the second ring and I told her everything, all of it at once. The loan, the grocery money, the $14,000, all of it spilling out in no particular order while I sat on the edge of my bed in my scrubs, still not having eaten the pasta I'd reheated an hour ago. You need to pull your credit report tonight, she said. Right now, before you do anything else. I did. And the pasta got cold. The report came up on my screen, and I scrolled through it slowly, the way you read something you don't want to finish. There it was, the line of credit. But there was also a credit card. A store card from a home goods retailer. A small personal loan from 2022 with a balance I didn't recognize. 3 hard inquiries from lenders I'd never contacted. Each one was a little needle. By the time I got to the bottom of the page, I felt punctured. Simone stayed on the phone while I wrote everything down. Account numbers, dates, balances, the name of the creditors. She didn't fill the silence with false comfort. She just stayed there, which was exactly what I needed. What are you going to do? She finally asked. I don't know yet, I said. But I'm not going to let him keep doing this. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there and went back through every moment I could remember when Derek had asked me to just sign something real quick, or fill out this form for me. There had been a moment, maybe 2 years back, when he'd asked me to help him set up an account for a utility transfer and I'd put in my information because he said the system needed a cosigner. I hadn't thought twice about it. He was my brother. You don't interrogate your brother about paperwork. I thought about all the ways I'd handed him my trust because I didn't want to be the kind of person who suspected her own family. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 8 months. I drove to the local consumer protection office and sat in a waiting room with the number in my hand until they called me up. The woman at the desk was patient and direct. She walked me through what I was looking at. The accounts opened without my explicit consent, even if they bore my signature, even if they used my information I might have provided for other purposes, and told me I had options. Disputing the accounts with the 3 credit bureaus, filing a fraud report, contacting the creditors directly, and if I wanted to escalate it, filing a police report, because what had been done was a crime. It didn't matter that the person who did it lived in my house. I asked her what would happen if I filed a police report against a family member. She said the same thing that legal aid woman had said in a story I'd once read online. Your relationship to the person who harmed you doesn't change what they did. I drove home and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. Over the next 2 weeks, I did everything slowly and carefully. I opened a new checking account at a credit union across town. One Derek had no connection to. I changed my direct deposit. I put a fraud alert on my credit file with all 3 bureaus. I called every creditor associated with the unauthorized accounts and began the dispute process. I documented everything in a shared Google Drive folder that only Simone had access to. Screenshots of texts, photos of the envelopes, a spreadsheet of every expense I'd covered in the past year and a half. I didn't confront Derek again. I didn't tell him what I was doing. I just got very quiet and very organized, and I let him assume I'd moved on. He assumed wrong. The first sign that things were shifting came on a Thursday evening when I got home and Derek was waiting for me in the kitchen. He was tense in the way people get when they've been rehearsing something. I need to talk to you, he said. I set my bag down. Okay. I heard from the bank. About the account. They flagged it as disputed. He was watching my face carefully. What did you do? I disputed a fraudulent account, I said. His jaw tightened. You're going to mess up my credit. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the sheer nerve of it. The idea that my response to him destroying my credit was going to damage his. Derek, you opened a line of credit in my name without telling me. You've been making charges on accounts I didn't know existed. My credit is already damaged. I'm fixing it. It was a loan, he said again, like repetition would change what it was. I told you I'd pay it back. You've been telling me you'd pay things back for almost 2 years, I said. When? He didn't answer that. He switched tactics, the way he always did when a direct argument wasn't working. You know what your problem is? You've always thought you were better than me. You went to college, you got your little job, and now you think you don't owe this family anything. I looked at him. I thought about how many times that sentence, or some version of it, had been used to keep me from asking for what was fair. The implication that wanting basic fairness from your own family was arrogance, that needing to be treated like a person and not a resource was somehow a personality flaw. I don't owe you my identity, I said quietly. That's where I'm drawing the line. I walked to my room and closed the door. 2 days later, I found out he'd called our Uncle Vic. Uncle Vic is our dad's older brother, a well-meaning man who has always believed that family disputes should be handled in-house, that airing grievances to outsiders is a form of betrayal, and that as the oldest male relative, it falls to him to mediate. He called me that Saturday morning with the energy of someone who had been thoroughly briefed by one side of the story. Your brother's real upset, Nora, he said. I'm Nora, by the way. I should have said that sooner. Nora Lindell, 28, Columbus, Ohio. Now you know. I understand he's upset, I said. He says you're trying to get him in legal trouble. He says you went and disputed some accounts without even talking to him first. I talked to him first, I said. He told me it wasn't a big deal. Now listen, your mother wouldn't have wanted this. She would have wanted you two to work it out between yourselves. I took a slow breath. My mother had worked 2 jobs for most of my childhood. She'd been careful with money in a way that made you understand, even as a kid, that every dollar meant something. The idea of her watching Derek drain my savings and open loans in my name while telling me not to make a fuss, no. I didn't think that was what she would have wanted at all. Uncle Vic, I said, would you like to see the documents? A pause. What documents? The credit card statements, the loan paperwork, the credit report showing accounts opened in my name that I didn't apply for. I have all of it. I'd be happy to bring it over. Another pause. Longer. Well, he said finally, I suppose I should see what we're actually dealing with. I drove to his house that Sunday with a folder under my arm, the same way you walk into a meeting when you already know the outcome, but you need everyone else in the room to see it too. Derek was there when I arrived. That surprised me. I hadn't expected him to be. He was sitting in the armchair in the corner, and he looked at me when I walked in with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Not angry. Scared. Uncle Vic sat across from me at the dining room table. I laid everything out the way I'd laid it out 100 times in my head, calmly, in chronological order, without editorializing. Here is the account. Here is the date it was opened. Here is the charge history. Here is my location on those dates, pulled from my work schedule. Here's my credit report before and after. Uncle Vic was quiet for a long time. Derek, he finally said, is this true? Derek shifted in the chair. She signed things, she knew. I signed a form for utility cosigner 2 years ago, I said. That's the only form I knowingly signed. The rest I have no record of and no knowledge of. The creditors have confirmed this is under investigation. Uncle Vic picked up one of the statements and studied it. He had the look of a man who had come into a room expecting to referee a sibling spat and had walked into something considerably more serious. How much does all of this come to? He asked. The unauthorized accounts totaled just over $13,000, I said. That doesn't include the $14,000 in shared household expenses I've covered over the past 19 months. The room was quiet. Derek said, I was going to pay it back. It was the 3rd time he'd said that. I don't think he even heard himself anymore. Uncle Vic set the paper down. Son, he said, and the word came out heavy. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is serious. Derek's face went through several things at once. He landed on anger because that was the familiar shore. Fine, he said, standing up. Fine. You want to destroy me? Go ahead. Tell your lawyers, tell the banks, tell whoever you want. I'll be the villain. I'll be the bad guy. But when you're sitting alone in that house and you need help, don't come to me. He walked out. The front door closed behind him. Uncle Vic and I sat in the silence he left. I'm sorry, my uncle said quietly. I didn't know it had gotten this far. I know, I said. Most people don't. Because I kept it quiet. He looked at the folder on the table. What are you going to do? I've already started the dispute process, I said. Some of the accounts will likely be cleared. The fraud report is on file. As for the house. I paused. I talked to an attorney last week. Since the property is jointly owned, I have options. One of them is a partition. I could force a sale, but I'm not there yet. What I'm asking for right now is simple. I want Derek to move out, or I want him to start paying his half of everything, documented, on time, no exceptions. And I want a repayment plan for what's already owed, in writing, notarized. Uncle Vic nodded slowly. And if he refuses, then I'll pursue every legal option available to me, I said. I've already spoken to an attorney. I know what those options are. I didn't say it with heat. That was the part that surprised even me. How calm I felt. I had spent so long being afraid of this conversation, afraid of being the one who caused drama, afraid of being the sister who didn't have her family's back. But sitting there with the proof laid out on the table, I didn't feel afraid. I felt like someone who had done her homework and was prepared to finish what had been started without her consent. Uncle Vic agreed to talk to Derek. He didn't make promises, but he agreed to try. I drove home alone and let myself into a house that was very quiet. Derek's lights were off downstairs. I didn't know where he'd gone, and for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't going to go check. The weeks after that were the strangest kind of hard, not the sharp, immediate heart of crisis, but the slow heart of living through a thing that wasn't over yet. Derek didn't come back for 3 days. When he did, he came back quieter. The bluster was gone. He didn't make eye contact with me in the kitchen. Simone came over one evening and we sat on the back porch with cups of tea, the kind of ordinary thing that felt significant because I hadn't had many ordinary evenings in a long time. Do you feel guilty? She asked. I thought about it honestly. Yes and no, I said. I feel something like guilt. But when I really sit with it, I think what I actually feel is grief. For the relationship we could have had if he'd just treated me like a person. She nodded. That's different. It is, I said. Guilt would mean I did something wrong. I don't think I did anything wrong. A week later, a letter arrived from the first creditor. One account had been flagged for fraud review and temporarily suspended. Then another. The dispute process was working, slowly, the way bureaucratic things do. But it was working. My credit score, which had dropped 43 points, started to climb. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single moment where everything resolved itself. It was just a slow, incremental return to solid ground. Derek sent me a text one night. It said, I know what I did was wrong. I don't know how to fix it. I read it twice. I set my phone face down on the nightstand. I didn't respond that night. Not because I was punishing him, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say, and I had learned, finally, at 28, the hard way, that I didn't have to fill every silence. I didn't have to rush to make things comfortable for someone who had made my life profoundly uncomfortable for years. 2 weeks later, he texted again. Can we talk? This time I answered, yes, but I have conditions. We sat at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table we'd grown up eating breakfast at. The same one where our mom used to pay her bills on Sunday mornings with a calculator and a cup of coffee, and I laid out what I needed. A notarized repayment plan. His name added to every shared bill going forward with automatic payments from his account. A timeline for either buying out my half of the property or listing it for sale. He was quiet through all of it. That's a lot, he said when I finished. I know, I said. It's also fair. He looked down at the table. He looked like someone who had run out of moves and was finally, reluctantly accepting that the game was over. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "At first. I told myself I'd fix it before you even noticed." "But I noticed," I said. "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You noticed, Derek." I waited until he looked at me. "I'm not trying to destroy you. I never was. But I'm also not going to keep absorbing the consequences of your choices. That's not what siblings do. That's not what anybody should do." He nodded. It wasn't a full concession, but it was something. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. He took the papers I'd printed, the draft repayment agreement, said he'd have it notarized by Friday, and went back downstairs. I sat at the table for a while after he left, in the quiet of the house we'd both inherited from a woman who'd worked herself thin, trying to give us a better start than she'd had. I thought about what she would say if she could see us now. I didn't think she'd be proud of Derek, but I also didn't think she'd want me to set myself on fire to keep him warm. She taught me, by example if not by words, that love is not the same thing as self-erasure. He did get the agreement notarized. That Friday, like he said. The first payment came 3 weeks after that. It wasn't large. We'd agreed on an amount that was realistic given what he actually earned. But it came. On time. It cleared. I stood in my kitchen looking at my banking app and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not vindication, but something quieter. Something like relief mixed with a sadness I didn't have a clean word for. A few months after that, I started looking at apartments. Not out of bitterness, not to escape, but because I was finally actually ready. The legal situation had mostly resolved. 2 of the 3 accounts had been cleared from my credit history, and the third was still under review, but had been suspended. The repayment plan was holding. My credit score had recovered enough that I qualified for a decent rental without a cosigner. I found a 1-bedroom on the east side of Columbus, 3rd floor, with windows that caught the afternoon light. It was not glamorous. The kitchen was smaller than the one I'd grown up in, and the closet was aggressively inadequate. But when I stood in it during the showing, I felt something so unfamiliar it took me a second to name it. It was quiet. It was just mine. Simone helped me move in on a Saturday in March. We made 3 trips in her truck and ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet, just boxes and 1 lamp and the feeling of breathing without bracing for something. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Weird," I said. "Good weird." She smiled. "You've been bracing for a long time." "I have," I said. "Derek texted me the day I moved out. Just, good luck, Nora. I hope you're happy there." It was the most genuinely kind thing he'd said to me in years. Maybe the most honest. I sat with my phone in my hand in my empty new apartment, 1 lamp casting a warm circle on the bare floor, and I thought about how complicated it is to love a person who hurt you. How it doesn't resolve into something clean. How you can be glad something is over and still mourn the version of it that could have existed. I typed back. "Thank you. Take care of yourself, Derek. Please." And I meant it. All of it. I'm not going to tell you everything is fixed, because it isn't. There's still a dispute in process with 1 creditor. Derek and I are still working through the property question, slowly with lawyers, which is the only way that conversation can happen right now. We're not close. We might not be close again for a long time, maybe ever. I don't know, but I know this. I spent years making myself smaller so that Derek could feel bigger. I covered costs that weren't mine, absorbed blame that wasn't mine, and kept quiet about damage that was very much mine to name. I told myself it was loyalty. I told myself it was loyalty. What it actually was fear. Fear of being the difficult one. Fear of breaking something that was already broken but felt from the outside like it was still whole. The night Derek told me I was too good to pay my own way, that night was the night I stopped being afraid. He said it like it was an insult. He said it like the idea of me being independent was something I should be ashamed of. Instead, I wrote it down on a sticky note and stuck it to my bathroom mirror. A reminder. You are too good to keep paying for things that are breaking you. Go pay your own way, Nora. So I did. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. 28 years old, a full-time job, my own paycheck, and I was still handing it over like I owed someone for the privilege of existing. I used to tell myself it was loyalty, that covering Derek's share of the electric bill, the internet, the groceries, was just what you do for family. But loyalty is a choice you make freely. What I was doing wasn't free. It cost me every single month, in dollars and in something harder to measure. The slow erosion of believing I had the right to say no. What I understand now, looking back, is that the situation didn't stay that way by accident. Every time I covered a bill without saying anything, I was teaching Derek that there were no consequences. Every time I absorbed the discomfort of an unfair arrangement to keep the peace, I was confirming that the peace was my job to maintain. I wasn't just paying his share of the utilities. I was paying for the illusion that everything was fine. And the longer I paid for that illusion, the more it cost. That's the thing about letting things go unaddressed. They don't stay the same size. They grow. What started as Derek asking me to spot him for 1 month became 19 months and $14,000. What started as him borrowing my goodwill became him borrowing my identity. Not because he woke up one day and decided to be a criminal, but because nothing I'd done up to that point had suggested there would ever be a line I wouldn't let him cross. The line I drew wasn't drawn in anger. It was drawn in clarity. There's a difference. Anger is reactive. It flares and fades and sometimes makes things worse. What I felt, sitting at that kitchen table with my credit report in front of me and Simone on the phone, wasn't rage. It was something quieter and more durable. It was the understanding that I could not keep absorbing the consequences of someone else's choices and call that love. Love doesn't require self-destruction. It never did. I just hadn't been taught that clearly enough. Nora, I kept telling myself, you are not responsible for managing his life. You are responsible for yours. That realization, that simple, obvious, somehow revolutionary realization, is what changed everything. Not the dispute letters. Not the notarized agreement. Not Uncle Vic finally seeing the documents spread out on his dining room table. Those were all results. The cause was the moment I decided that my future was not available as collateral for someone else's choices. Integrity, I've learned, is not just about telling the truth. It's about acting in alignment with what you know to be true, even when it's hard. Even when the person looking back at you from across the table is someone you grew up with, someone you love, someone you'd give almost anything for. Almost. That word matters. Almost everything, but not yourself. Never yourself. I don't know what Derek will do with the space I've created. That part is up to him. What I do know is that I walked out of that childhood home and into a one-bedroom apartment with afternoon light and quiet, and the first real breath I'd taken in years. I earned that quiet. Not by being unkind. By finally being honest about what I was owed, what I was willing to give, and where the difference between the two had been slowly swallowing me whole.